the Nepalese issues, where the protests, where, yep, um, 22 people with 19 people, depending on which source you read, were killed in recent protests. There was footage unsourced on Twitter that I saw of them actually throwing politicians into the river. That was kind of funny, but unfortunately unsourced. But the fact that they've now set fire to the Parliament building and other government buildings, there's a lot of anger. Now, yes, the government of Nepal has been very, very unstable since the overthrow of the monarchy, and yep, the government has basically collapsed as a result. Then the impetus, which most people agree on now, it was, and I mean even at the time, was the ban on social media. I don't know whether countries like the UK and Australia and the US are paying attention to this because they're attempting to make various bans on people from around the place. I mean, Australia is introducing a ban on social media for those under the age of 16 with effect start of December, I believe. The UK is obviously rolling out their Online Safety / Surveillance Act at the moment, and they're engaged in putting people through the criminal justice system for statements that they've made online. Now, I will take a little sidebar there. People saying, well, that's a bit weird that they're arresting people for seemingly non-violent rhetoric online. I believe that this is a bit of a hangover from, well, probably back as far as Henry VIII, but the idea that there is certain speech that is considered banned. There is certain banned speech in the UK. It's not a new thing. Uh, yeah, you could probably draw a long line all the way back to the um, dissolution of the monasteries, the establishment of the Anglican Church, and so on and so forth. But when the troubles were on in Northern Ireland, there was quite clearly certain speech that was not permitted. It would have been regarded as insightful, not insightful as in that makes good sense, but it would have been considered inciting people to violence or acts of hatred. It would have been, I mean, you wouldn't have walked down the Shankill Road saying certain things, even if it wasn't illegal. You probably would have encountered social pushback because you were saying things that shouldn't be said in a place that shouldn't have been said. And yeah, yeah, people kind of went, okay, yeah, well, Northern Ireland kind of makes sense. They try to sort of keep the peace, and you keep the peace by saying, look, don't say stupid things. Well, saying stupid things, being told you can't say stupid things, means that you've got banned speech of some degree. The one that, well, was a bit more surprising to me, but was not Northern Ireland, is in Scotland, where public transport, I saw photos from on public transport, which basically said that there is certain speech which is banned speech. And this was to do more with the, I guess the expression of it was through sport, Celtic Rangers rivalry. I won't know exactly which one is which, but one of them has a predominantly Catholic supporter base, and the other one was predominantly Protestant. Okay, well, the wars of the religions ended ages ago. Why is it still a problem? Well, it's um, football violence or supporter violence has been a thing for a while in Europe, but there are soccer teams or football teams around which certain communities gather, or they're more associated. There's some really quite racist supporter chants, particularly in the Netherlands, where some of the teams are associated with Jews, and so supporters of other teams will target it with anti-Semitic chants and things like that. But back in the UK, because of the sensitivities and the risk of hooligan violence associated with the derby, and basically whenever Rangers play Celtic, that there are certain things that you're not allowed to talk about or not allowed to say openly because it would be considered an attempt to incite violence. And so there is banned speech. Okay? Kind of makes sense when you look at it that way. It's like, yeah, we want to let people say whatever they want. But when it's clearly a term or a phrase or words being used to encourage people to violence and it has historically resulted in violence, yeah, I think most people say, yeah, okay, fair enough. Don't say that. But it's counted as banned speech. So we look at what the UK is currently doing. Most people see that as an overreaction. They don't see it on the same level as a supporter group riling up another supporter group and encouraging them to punch on in the streets or stab each other or anything like that. So they see the rhetoric a bit different. They also see the rhetoric going from being football hooligans who were not necessarily broadly represented throughout society, but you're now seeing people being arrested or being targeted who would never have been associated with that stuff in the past. And it's, I guess, eye-opening for some to realise that words and actions have consequences, but it's also people saying, well, maybe the consequences for this, which is not maybe in inciting people to violence, is overstepping bounds, is that we're pushing too far, or that it's suppressing valid debate and dissatisfaction with what's going on. And so everyone's like pointing at 1984 and all the other bits and pieces as an attempt to suppress. And yeah, obviously people feel that given how the internet was sort of started becoming available to people and what people can do online, of course they're feeling like their rights are being quashed somewhat. Again, I don't know whether Australia and the UK and the US are taking a lot of the message away from what's happening in Nepal. I don't know that it's going to get to that stage of violence. I don't know that you'd say the governments in those other nations are as unstable as they are in Nepal. Now, France, when they lost their PM the other day, had massive protests all of a sudden. Now, they weren't tied to the fact the PM got sacked, they were coincidental. But uh, there's this undercurrent of, there's a lot of dissatisfaction amongst the people, which is now bubbling up and being shown in many different ways. And I think there's a lot of governments out there that are more concerned than they're letting on. So yeah, the obviously they've brought the army in to try and squash things. And whilst it started about a ban on social media platforms, it's now sort of evolved into a more of an anti-corruption stance, almost like Occupy Wall Street kind of started out. There was another protest not long ago, another series of protests where it started for one reason, but the broader dissatisfaction was brought forward, and people went, "No, this is the reason now. This is what we were always upset about, and is now the reason for the protest continuing." So, yeah, people are unhappy. Not not everybody can magic a completely stable country after transition from a royalty or anything like that, or even, I mean, even stable countries can go through massive periods of political unrest. Yeah, it's issue. I mean, fake news, hate speech, and online fraud. I mean, they're the standard things that get trotted out. Hmm, yeah, It's certainly interesting. I mean, that was the BBC talking about it. Um, that was the Nepal Parliament set on fire article. So yeah, obviously they brought the army out to run it. Now they've claimed now that the protests are being taken in different directions. Well, they kind of are, but people are now say that they're now targeting corruption. It, I mean, it doesn't help when you burn the building down. Bit hard for people to be on your side then, or looting and being violent. I mean, okay, disruption attracts people who, well, black bloc type protesters, anarchists, who are like, alrighty, game on. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily call it a revolution, but yeah, they're continuing. And I think a lot of people weren't really aware of the degree of instability. Sorry, excuse me. The degree of instability in Nepal. I think there was another article I think I saw. Yep. So the ABC News had it as well. But yeah, again, talking about it, I dare say it's probably largely ABC and the BBC. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, it should have a byline at the end. They tend to have a byline at the end. ABC with wires. So yeah, it's largely come off the wires stuff. But when you look at what was banned, I mean, I can understand why they got upset. Hey, maybe we'll see 16-year-olds riot here in Australia when that sort of ban kicks off in December for them. Don't know. Don't know. And yeah, we'll see.